Hello, Garland Nixon here. It's Tuesday morning, and I'm back with the great Laith Maroof, and we're going to learn straight from the horse's mouth, as they say, what's happening in West Asia. Let's talk. As always, don't forget, Laith Maroof has a website. It's freepalestine.video. That's freepalestine.video, where they're doing a lot of their good works to let everyone know what's happening in the region. They're doing English language work, which is critical because a lot of the things going on there we don't find out about because they're not translated into English. In fact, I listened to a guy yesterday or the day before who was from Israel, and his family was in Israel. And he said that even the articles that are written in Israeli newspaper, when they're written in English, they're actually different. That the stories that they are writing to the people in Israel, and they'll write the same story on the English version of the website, but it's different because they got to propagandize. So go to freepalestine.video where you can get lots of info about what Laith is doing and his team. And there is a button there. And there's ways for you to donate. So make sure you work to donate and try to support them, keep them going. If you can't afford it, that's fine. Just, it's tough. There's tough times all over, but you can share the freepalestine.video page on all your social media platforms and make a note for people to donate when they get to the site. So we can keep this work going. We can find out what's happening. All right, Laith Maroof, let's start here. We got a bunch of things to talk about. We'll start with Israel threatening Hezbollah. Now, what I'm reading, every time I turn on, it's like another Israeli site got hit, another radar site got hit, another intelligence site got hit. There's fires all over the place. It looks like, there's a question, will Hezbollah get involved? Why isn't Hezbollah doing that? Seems to me like they're pounding the hell out of Israel, to be quite frank. Israel's threatening Lebanon, but they're losing in Gaza. I mean, it seems, I don't know if it's an empty threat, if they think they're going to drag the U.S. into it or what, but things are not looking really good for the Israelis right now. They seem to be in collapse. Your thoughts?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, we've heard the Zionists threaten Lebanon for 8 months now. Every month almost on cue, they threaten to attack Lebanon. And what we have seen in return is actually the Islamic resistance, Hezbollah, increasing the level of their attacks and complexity. Just before the Eid, the festival at the end of the Hajj that is happening right now, there was a huge escalation on both sides of the border. The Israelis assassinated the highest ranking Hezbollah commander, officer since the beginning of the war, Talib Abdullah, his name is. He was a field general, so in charge of a division of Hezbollah fighters. A division is around 30,000 fighters, and he was in charge of the most active part of the war zone, the Golan Heights and the Hula Valley, or the Panhandle of Palestine, where we've seen the most attacks by Hezbollah. And when they assassinated him, the response of Hezbollah was to actually show that his absence is not going to affect the fight. And what they did is they started doing very complex attacks that include swarms of drones. So before last week, we would be seeing one drone at a time going attacking targets. Now we're seeing swarms of 3 up to 6 drones attacking Israeli sites at the same time as hundreds of missiles and projectiles are falling on those same sites. We saw them destroy a Iron Dome battery. They filmed it. We saw also, by the way, all the videos of Hezbollah's operations. They come on a daily basis. They come out on a daily basis. Free Palestine TV is starting to translate them, beginning today. If you want, you can see on our page on X the videos from 2 nights ago that were released by Hezbollah. And one of those videos that I was going to talk about, it showed a loitering drone hovering over the major artillery base in the western sector of northern Palestine, near the Akka city, and it's loitering on top of this major artillery base. And they show you in the video the different parts of the base, what it is. Here's where the howitzers are. Here's where the officers' barracks are. Here's where the storage units are. And at the same time, this loitering drone filmed the swarm of drones hitting their targets in the base. So they have now, and this was coupled with the night before they attacked the major artillery base in the Golan Heights. So these are the two big artillery bases for the Zionist military in North Palestine. There's none other than those two. And so what does that mean? That means that this is going to hugely affect any possibility of Israel attacking Lebanon. We started this with you asking the question, can they attack Lebanon? In those 48 hours, as a response to the assassination of Talib Abdullah, they also hit the two major Israeli weapons factories in the north of Palestine. One of them is the factory responsible for building the armor for the tanks and the APCs. So now they don't have the ability to build armor for APCs that could invade, or tanks that could invade Lebanon. And we've seen a kind of a quiet moment right now in the last 24 hours because of the Eid. And if the Israelis, I think by tonight we should be seeing a return to the major level of attacks. Clearly the Israelis are lost a lot of important people in these responses and important positions over the last 3 days. And I don't think they're able to invade South Lebanon, because they could barely invade the Gaza concentration camp. It's a flat area of land that is 22 kilometers by 7 kilometers wide. South Lebanon is a forested area that has a lot of hills and valleys and mountains. It's so hard that even in 2006, the Israeli military couldn't invade. This is, we're talking 18 years ago. The Israelis couldn't enter 1 kilometer into the land of South Lebanon, and their invading forces were destroyed. It was called the Merkava massacre, when the Israelis lost tens of Merkavas in one day. So I think if the Israelis enter into a war with Lebanon, it will be North Palestine that is invaded and not South Lebanon. Prior to this assassination over the last few months, we saw videos of Hezbollah fighters coming practically to the fences of Israeli military bases inside North Palestine and firing medium-size and small-size armaments, like Kalashnikovs onto, and we Sayyid Hassan Nasrallah, the Secretary General of Hezbollah, in one of his speeches after that action, that they released a video on purpose that showed a complete readiness and complexity of ground force, where you had the a few of the fighters with the small armaments, then a squad with them that's carrying medium-sized armaments, and then the squad carrying the ATGMs, and that video being released on purpose, and it's from just tens of meters away from the fence of this base, was just to give a hint to the Israelis. And in his speech, Sayyid Hassan Nasrallah, he said, if we want, we would be seeing a Hezbollah flag being raised on top of this base at any moment. And that shows how the Israelis also are not able to see the coming attack at them from these forces. Now, I hope actually that Israel attacks Lebanon. Maybe we can end it, and this genocide would stop. But it's clear that Israelis want to have America fight this war on their behalf. Their military is totally destroyed right now. We saw how the American Special Forces invaded Nusayrat refugee camp in Gaza through the American-built pier, using American special forces and using the cover of aid trucks coming out of off that pier, and the slaughter, of course, of 100 and somewhat 70 people to retrieve those 4 prisoners of war. The United States did this operation. It wasn't the Israelis. They don't even have the ability to do such a thing anymore.
I did want to ask you this also relative to, expansion of conflict and the broader conflict. I was watching a guy the other day, Israeli, Jewish guy here in America, talking about, apparently he doesn't agree with what's going on back in occupied Palestine, talking about, his conversations with people. And he mentioned, they're having trouble getting daily things, what I mean? They're in their stores, that the prices are astronomically high, that their economy is in deep and serious trouble. That being said, it seems to me that a significant part of that is Yemen's effective military blockade on the Red Sea. Can you talk about, I am convinced that something happened to the USS Eisenhower, that it was struck. Yemen has said I know they've sunk container ships. Ships now. They've really broadened what they're able to do. I'm reading online that the U.S. is saying this is their most fierce naval battle since World War II. And I'm like, but Yemen doesn't have a navy. You're losing a naval battle to somebody that doesn't have a navy, but you're threatening Russia and China. Ain't gonna work out well. At any rate, what's happening with Yemen? What are they saying? What successes have they had? How's it affecting the region?
Yeah, let me. I'm gonna answer first the issue of economy in the Zionist colony, and we heard, obviously, the last time they gave us their economic numbers was in December or early January, when they talked about the last quarter of 2023, and at that point they said they lost 30% of their GDP. So now we're in June. So we had in the end of June almost. So we have 2 quarters that are unaccounted for. So if they lost 30% in the last quarter of 2023, they clearly are right now lost, maybe 60, 70%, if not more, of their GDP. And some of the finance ministers and former finance ministers of the Zionist colony are saying that it will take them at least a decade. If they stop the war right now, it will take them a decade and a half to come back to their full capacity that they were in before. And clearly, just so people don't have this delusion that or believe the propaganda, Israel doesn't have a real economy, never had one. Israel's economy is based on the coercion of Western corporations by their political class to open factories in this region that is surrounded with war. Who would, in their sane mind, open a factory like, let's say, Intel, which now is saying it's stopping the project to build a $25 billion factory for chips in the Zionist colony? Who would open you have the whole world to do it, and better places, and no war, and central location with tons of workers. Who would open there if it wasn't a political decision to do so? So Israel doesn't have a real economy. It has an inflated, enforced economy by the West that is always subsidized. This military is subsidized. Everything's subsidized. That whole bullshit about what is it? The startup nation and the great Israeli um, software and hardware. All of that has been laid bare in this war. All the surveillance that supposedly we prowess of Israel got raped on October 7th. It wasn't Israeli women that got raped on October 7th. That never happened. But their whole prowess about, this is what our viewers should understand. There is no such thing as an Israeli economy if it's not loaded on purpose by the West. Now, coming back to Yemen, we just heard the American Navy admit that they have spent over $1 billion in the last few months, not since the beginning of this war, to fight Ansarullah. This is the most expensive naval operation they've been involved in a long time, and they're spending it to protect the Zionists. And of course, we have seen these interviews with American generals, and they're on the Eisenhower and other over the last few weeks being done by American journalists. And, just looking at the face of the officers on these ships, how serious they are when they say that this is the most dangerous mission that they've ever been involved in their whole career. Because nobody was, and no matter how many times the Americans were slaughtering peoples off their ships, nobody was attacking these ships. This is the first time, actually, that they see themselves being attacked in these waters. And of course, they said this is the most complex and most dangerous and most advanced naval battle since World War II. That shows you the huge shift that we're seeing in projection of power. For decades, if not centuries, it has been naval-based power that can dominate land-based power. Yes, Ansarullah don't have a navy, but now we see the return of importance of land-based power with this advancement of very accurate guided missiles and very advanced drones that can be available to land-based power to dominate and repel a sea-based power. And that's a huge thing. It is going to affect the United States globally and the Western projection of power. And we will see the more countries have the abilities that Ansarullah has, the more we will see the West retreats to its shores and retreat to its natural base. Okay? And this is going to accelerate the more the United States exposes itself just to protect the Zionist colony. If the US tries to enter, for instance, Gaza, as the Israeli military is collapsing, we will see a humiliation of American ground forces. If the US tries to attack Lebanon to protect the Zionist colony, and Hochstein, by the way, the American representative, who's an Israeli ex-officer, is today arrived in Beirut, and he's trying to negotiate a ceasefire. And Hezbollah said they will not meet with anybody, and they will not stop attacking the Zionist colony. Similarly, Ansarullah, until there is a ceasefire in Gaza. Beyond that, nobody needs to talk to Ansarullah or Hezbollah. We will continue this attacking the Zionist colony till the ceasefire happens. And one last thing, I know I ranted today more than usual because
No
I've trained myself not to go on these rants, but because we've been off last week. Listen, Ansarullah is doing these complex, coordinated attacks with the Iraqi resistance. This is even more uh, you know worthy to think about. Look, they have to coordinate firing missiles and drones from Lebanon, from Yemen and Iraq at the same time. There's a difference in distance between Iraq and Yemen, and each one of them, they're both targeting the same target, and each one of them has a certain part of the component of the layered complex attack, and they have to coordinate the sec by second when these missile decoy missiles arrive, and when the targeted missile, the guided missiles arrive, and when the drones arrive from two different countries, and they are hitting huge targets in the Golan Heights and in Haifa. Okay, and that shows you that not added to this complexity is the fact that they know the paths that have been cleared by Hezbollah in Lebanon, that because Hezbollah destroyed at least five. This is what we know, announced by Hezbollah, the five Iron Dome batteries in the north of Palestine, and one of the David slings. So what does that mean? That means there's an area that is now porous in the north of Palestine to infiltration by drones and guided missiles. And both the Iraqi and the Yemeni resistance have the details about their paths and how to hit Haifa with their targets.
Wow. Before we go further on this, I do have a couple of world things from around the world that I want to throw at you. I think they're of consequence. Okay. So let me do this. I'm going to put them together. Here's the first one. Okay. Lost it. All right. Mali seeks to boost military capabilities with Russia's assistance. And we see Mali's aim is to promptly bolster its military capabilities with Russia's assistance. Both countries are discussing a military equipment procurement program. Okay, that's number one. All right, here's the second one. Here's number two. And I think they're both of tremendous consequence. Russia and North Korea to sign strategic partnership treaty. The Kremlin has said the agreement seeks to boost regional stability and is not directed against third countries. They'll be aimed at ensuring greater stability in the Northeast. They said that they're going to jointly oppose illegitimate unilateral restrictions and shape the architecture of equal and indivisible security in Eurasia. Okay. Recently, one of the things that was
I think we lost Garland.
Sorry about that. You still there?
Yeah, I'm still here.
Okay. Sorry about that. I accidentally clicked the wrong thing. All right. Recently, one of the things that was said by the Russians when the U.S. was saying we're going to allow, Ukraine to hit deeper and to use more weapons, and the Russians said, well, two can play at that game. We can arm some of your adversaries. We can, and now we hear a strategic partnership with North Korea, Mali. It seems to me that Russia's taking a page out of Iran's, that they all learn from each other, that this team, Russia, China, are learning from each other. Iran provides some drones for Russia. Russia provides some technology for someone or other. And it seems to me that Russia's looking at, or the group is looking at Iran's success in building a regional alliance and saying, well, why don't we do this on a worldwide basis? And Mali, it seems to me that the Sahel region, that Africa is an area that I think Russia and China is set to, let's say, armed to the teeth so that they can protect themselves. That same with North Korea. Your thoughts on what's going on here with Russia, particularly a strategic partnership with North Korea, arming. I don't think Mali is going to be the only place in Africa that they arm. Your thoughts on all of this and what it means?
Yeah, I mean, look, the Iranians have been actually the door that opened Central Africa and the Sahara region, the Sahel, to the Russians. And can you imagine that? Iran is the one that is helping Russia enter this region. And it is very crucial, this region, because once you have the Sahel, you are projecting yourself into the West Africa region, and into the Congo, into all of that, and plus you're giving a second line to the North African countries like Algeria, who have always had problems coming from the Sahel region when it was controlled by the French and the Americans. That's the only reason Algeria is not as radical as it was, let's say, in the 60s and 70s. It was exposed to that and the attacks by the Wahhabi death squads, and that wreaked havoc in the country in the 90s. That was like a predecessor to the Daesh situation that we saw in the Syria region. And so this is probably worrying the Americans a lot, and the French, because it is accelerating their decline and their presence across all of Africa. And it is going to inspire more and more other places to follow suit. And of course, none of this would be happening if the U.S. and the West are not drowning in the quicksand of Gaza, and the Palestinians are refusing to surrender under the weight of this genocide. If the Palestinians have surrendered a long time ago, we would have seen a push by the U.S. It would have been free to do, and the West would have been free to do, spend their resources on oppressing other regions. Okay, in terms of North Korea, this is important because and President Putin is arriving in North Korea, I think, by tomorrow, or is it today? I'm not sure the date. So North Korea is getting ready for a visit by the president of Russia, which hasn't happened in decades. So, and this is going to solidify the position of Korea. Some of our viewers don't know, but look, the Syrian military engineering corps and scientific corps, the Iranian engineering and scientific corps military, and the North Koreans had a joint program. And this is why, for instance, the Syrian, and this joint program was from the 70s in terms of Syria and North Korea, and from the 80s, where after the Islamic Revolution happened in Iran, that joined that cooperation, and the whole components of the North Korean, Syrian, Iranian military rockets and the missiles programs and their nuclear programs were developed together. And this is why, for instance, the Syrian scientific and engineering core of the military was a huge target for the Israelis and the Americans over the last 10 years. Almost every few months, the Israelis still attack the scientific military complexes of Syria because they're so advanced. People think it's not, but it is. Without the Syrian scientists and so on, you wouldn't see what you're seeing also in North Korea. And without the North Korean scientists, you wouldn't have seen the Iranian, nuclear program and what have you. These are, and finally, to have Russia take a bold position to announce its alliances and comprehensive agreements with both Iran and North Korea. This is a great day for the independence of Asia and Fortress Asia, the fortification of Fortress Asia, to make sure that this becomes the core of the defense against Western imperialism. I'm looking forward for seeing North Korea open up to the rest of Asia, and seeing people move and tour there and so on, and to see what glorious engineering North Korea could bring to this alliance.
Absolutely. Turkey, Syria. I've been reading more recently about pressure on Turkey to normalize, to get their relations together with Syria. What's going on? We know that Turkey was aligned with U.S. imperialism and Western imperialism in Syria. I know the heat is on them from their own people to back away from that. And I'm hearing that I've been reading that Iraq may be involved in trying to get these things taken care of. Of course, we've got the Kurd situation there, and now Turkey's talking about wanting to be involved in BRICS. If they want to get in BRICS, they're going to have to get on board the BRICS train, which is going to mean get off the U.S. imperialist train. Turkey, Syria, Iraq, what's happening?
Yeah, this is now a renewed attempt, especially, look after Turkey's election last year and the kind of decline of the power of Erdogan and his need to work with the Turkish nationalist parties um, who are against the war in Syria. We are seeing now the results of that, and we will hope that it goes somewhere. But look, it's important to remember that Erdogan is still a Western puppet. So I don't know how much I can trust him. But at least it's lifting some of the tensions and the pressure. Syria needs to be ready for a possible war. If it's the war spills into Lebanon, it means 100% Syrian military will be involved in this war. Syrian military will probably be invading to liberate the Golan Heights, which is now the ground is softened there. Hezbollah did a magnificent job in destroying practically all the Israeli positions in the Golan Heights over the last 7 months. So yes, it is in the interest of Russia and Syria that Turkey at least is kind of neutralized in this future war, even if it doesn't mean Turkey withdrawing yet from Syrian territory it occupies, at least to neutralize them, not to take a side, in this war. And we see the effects of even just the beginnings of these ideas of talk on the Kurdish Contras that are enslaved to the Americans, that are occupying the Syrian oil fields and gas fields. They're right now also scared that if Turkey makes a deal with Syria, that the Syrian military will be, allowed to attack the Kurd, or expected even if to attack the Kurdish militias, and then they will be left by themselves. Syria wouldn't be kind of distracted with the Turkish occupation and the Wahhabi Contras that they control. So even just the talk about it is shaking the whole ground around Syria. So at least that's a positive effect. I don't know how far it will go, because, as I said, Erdogan is still beholden to the Western economies and the imperial or masters in Washington, D.C.
Well, it certainly seems to me as though um, the Turks are starting to get the message. I mean, the bottom line is the old saying about rats jumping off a sinking ship, right? Everyone's looking at the West. Is there any discussion about have you had any discussion or any thoughts on the petrodollar? I don't know if you're familiar with that. The petrodollar is no more. Apparently, the Saudis didn't. Is that a conversation that's being had in your region?
Yeah, I mean, I saw all these posts about it, but I don't know if it's true, honestly. I understand the concept of the petrodollar, but it's been a while now that the Saudis are selling the Chinese oil in the yuan, and so the major other purchaser of Saudi oil is China, and that deal has been done. So it's
Right.
the Americans and the West are going to choose to pay in whatever they want to pay, and I don't think the Saudis would have a say in it. So sometimes you feel this people's wishes or dreams uh, outrun the reality on the ground. So everybody wants Turkey or Saudi Arabia to abandon the American position and shift to the new power basis. But how can you do that when 99% of all Saudi money is put in American or British banks? When they have no say really in how they're spending their money, and their whole national treasury and assets for 80 years are locked in Western banks. Okay, even if there's let's say a radical, by chance, a radical, not a pedophile, not a drunk, druggy Amir gets into power in Saudi Arabia. Let's imagine that moment happening, and he says, "I'm going out of this alliance with the United States." How is he going to get his money back?
Right.
I mean, Russia is losing hundreds of billions of dollars.
It'll be trillions for the Saudis. You know, I taught college back in 2009, 10, 11. And back then, part of my curriculum was the Saudis, basically the investments accounted for about 7% of the US economy. Think about that. That's huge. So they're so tied with the US economy. And what we're seeing with Russia and what the world sees now is what we should have already known, if you didn't already know, is that the US will use all leverage that they have for control. And that I don't care what you got invested in the West. If they're on the outs with you, they're going to steal your money and just kick you out. So the Saudis have to know that if they go awry of US imperialism too far, that the US is just going to steal all their money. So, and
Yes.
probably try to rub them out. I mean, that's reality.
Yes, and there's tens of thousands of American troops on the ground in Saudi, where all the oil fields are.
Look at Syria.
So
What are they going to do? They're going to they're going to do the same thing they did to Syria.
yes, so it is you know, it's hard to imagine it happening without the defeat of the Zionist colony and the beginning of the collapse of because of that, because of the liberation of Palestine, we may see the collapse of American presence and hegemony in the whole region, depending on how far the United States gets involved in the later stages of this war. That's the only hope I see for independence of something like these Gulf countries, or is clearly revolution, unification with the rest of the Arabic world, because of the expulsion. The minute the American troops leave, these regimes will all collapse. That's the only way that sovereignty is going to come to the people here. And it's been now decades that everybody laughs at the idea of Arabic unity. Not, I mean, in the region, but the world is, well, we're going back to Nasser's time. But truly, just like there's only one China, there's only one Arabic people and one Arabic region. And this region cannot sustain itself being chopped like this. You need the Egyptian population of 100 million to have as a working force. You need, but you need oil to run the machineries, and you need good cuisine and good culture for, and you need engineering. Each part of the Arabic world has a certain thing that makes it has to come together to become actually independent and sovereign. And hopefully soon we will see countries like Russia and China return to this idea of supporting Arab unity, and talking about one Arabic people, like we talk about one China.
Um, I did want to get your thoughts on the ceasefire that wasn't. You know, Joe Biden, no, we're going to have a ceasefire. Or Israel's agreed to it. Israel, no, what are you talking about? We haven't agreed to a ceasefire. Hamas, their position. What the hell went on with this whole discussion of a ceasefire and the confusion around it from your perspective in the Middle East?
Yeah, it was an American, but then it was an Israeli proposal, but then it was no man's proposal, and then it went to the UN and went through the Security Council like a blank check, and nobody understood what the hell is the proposal. And then it was provided to the Hamas, and Hamas said yes, but then the Israelis said no. But then we have to believe that the Hamas said no, otherwise they're anti-Semite. So it clearly was a clown show, and it was a media propaganda campaign directed specifically towards the American audience and the Western audience that still watch the mainstream media and or click once in a while and watch the news to just make these people feel that America tried to do something, Biden tried to do something, the West tried to do something, and as we're arriving right now in the elections in France and the UK and Canada and the US, all of them in a row, this was the only reason for this theatrics that we saw. But on the ground, as we saw, the genocide continues, the attacks continue. The American and British Air Force specifically are flying nonstop over Gaza. Their drones and their surveillance, and they're giving the positions for. And on the ground, the Israelis suffered the largest military defeats and over the last week since this supposed ceasefire was proposed, including what is being called um, the Nimr Shoah. Nimr is the name of this APC that Israelis built, and of course Shoah is meaning burning somebody, because the command APC, the Nimr APC that was carrying one of the command fighting force general and officers that were directing this invasion uh, of Rafah a few days ago was hit with a huge IUD, and there was a trap that was set for the Israeli forces, and they lost at least 12 officers there. There's been multiple other traps set up for the Israelis in both Jabalia and in Rafah. Today, there was an announcement. We haven't now got the full details yet. There was an announcement earlier in the Israeli media that today was the worst day for the Israeli army in Gaza. We don't know what happened. It must mean a huge hit that they got. So they are leading badly as an army on the ground in Gaza. They haven't been able to hold any part of the territory and not be hit every time they try to hit to stay and put in one location. And we even saw videos of the PLFP in a combined operation with Islamic Jihad. So this is not Hamas hitting the command center for the Israeli military inside what is Israel proper, so let's say, behind enemy lines, and scoring deaths on these Israeli forces.
I read recently that Netanyahu disbanded the war cabinet. Benny Gantz quit or left his position, whatever the case. It seems like there is, to say the least, some political instability. I mean, it looks to me like this: they've lost. The economy, such as it was, is in collapse. They don't have, they very great difficulty in getting, the day-to-day foodstuffs for their people. I was reading the other day that they got tens of thousands of people who were in North and settlers and stuff like that, who they've moved into these hotels. But the hotels, which were otherwise empty because they have no work, no people coming in, no customers, but that the hotels weren't designed to have like a families in there. So a hotel that's designed to have a room with one or two people who are going to be in there every now and then and only use so much hot water. Now it's a family of 5 in all of their rooms. They're using hot water. They're using electricity. They're overextending the restaurant. The hotels are being worn down to nothing because they weren't designed for these people indefinitely. They have no idea when and if the people will ever be able to go back to, the North. And something else interesting. This gentleman said that One of the things that he was told in Israel, a big problem is people have terrible problems getting a doctor's appointment. And he said, he asked, why is it? Is it because, so many people are injured? He said, no, because the doctors have all left the country. Because doctors and people who have a skill that can go back to another country and make money are getting the heck out of there, which can you blame them? And all of this, I look at it and I'm like, it seems to me that Israel, I mean, how did they continue this? I mean, maybe I'm continuing to repeat myself. I hope not, but I'm just looking at this saying, this thing is falling, the Israel project, just like the Ukraine project, is collapsing rapidly. When you consider how long they've been there, over the course of 6-8 months, rapidly collapsing, which I guess shows just how fragile this thing was all along.
Yes, yes. I'm glad you brought up the issue of their internally displaced. Because I just visited the frontline village of Khiam in South Lebanon. Yesterday, it was a very dangerous situation. There was shells falling, but it is the Eid, as I said before. So a lot of Lebanese from these frontline villages just went down. They didn't care that there was still shelling happening, and they actually were celebrating in these squares. So we went down and we visited. I was, as I said, the first international journalist to visit these frontline villages since the beginning of this war. But we visited the side that is not facing the Israeli base, and that is, they'll snipe you if they see you. We stayed on the other side, and there were still families there. The bakeries open, the butchers open, people going to the mosque and going to the church. In comparison, right across, the Israeli colony is empty, and it's been months now. And practically all the upwards of 7 kilometers into northern Palestine from the border, all those villages colonies are empty. Even the biggest ones like Kiryat Shmona in the panhandle of Palestine is emptied. All the Golan Heights emptied. There's no more civilians in the Golan Heights right now. The Israelis admitted this. There's no more civilian in the whole Golan Heights.
Wow.
Okay. And it used to be in the old days that when our civilians are the ones that end up in refugee camps, the Israelis just built a refugee camp because these hotels that you were talking about can't anymore take more. And it's been now 8 months that they're waiting for, serving these people for zero money practically, except what the government is giving them. And so the Israelis built a tented city refugee camp for the Zionist colony. It's called the Galilee camp. And this is the first in history of this battle. So
wow.
They're freaking out, the Zionist colonists. They're like, what the hell? It is Hezbollah that has liberated North Palestine without entering it. Okay. And it's Hezbollah that's forcing them into tents, and the Lebanese people are still coming back to their frontline villages. And that's a huge indicator to, of course, the accelerated collapse of the Zionist colony. And you're right, all of those who have high, education and double passport have left long ago. There's a huge number of desertion in the reserve corps of the Israeli military. Huge numbers. Like they're missing at least half of the called reserves. Gone. People just picked up and left the country when they're being called in for the reserve. Yesterday there was a huge demo for parents of soldiers serving in the north front with Hezbollah, with Lebanon, calling on the Israeli military to withdraw their kids and put them in bases further because Hezbollah is shooting them like sitting ducks. They can't defend themselves. And so anybody that's serving in these frontline villages is death warrant basically for them. And the Zionist military is just hiding all their deaths and not talking about it. Clearly at the end of, if this war stops ever, I think it's not going to stop, but until the end of the defeat of Israel, but we will discover actually that the Israelis have lost thousands of soldiers just in the north front with Lebanon.
I think we'll at some point discover that the Americans have lost some soldiers too. That some of the other countries, I believe that this is a NATO war, because NATO is just the Americans, and this is a NATO war, and that NATO is at war in Ukraine, and it's the same thing. They're fighting a war that they can't possibly win. You know, it's the old saying, what is it? You can't, like a tiger by the tail, you can't let go and you can't hold on. They're fighting two wars, one in Ukraine against Russia, and one, let's face it, against the Muslim people in occupied Palestine. And they are in a position now where there's no possibility that they can win, but they can't. It's total humiliation to walk away. So they can just keep going till the end and lose and face total humiliation that way, or try to get out. Right now, I see that the Russians offered them out. The Russians said, look, we can do a peace deal and walk away right now. But that would be humiliation. They can't. It seems to me that the U.S. empire can't look in the mirror and say, we can't do what we used to do. We can't dominate like we used to. They don't have the ability to live in the real world. They still are like threatening people like they're powerful, threatening people around the world, pretending that they're powerful. And every engagement, they are losing decisively.
Yes. And it's like the clash of civilization that they wanted to happen. Remember that book?
Yes.
Huntington or whatever, so it's or they wanted it to happen. And it's also a war on not only the Muslim people, it's a war on Christianity, it's a war on Judaism. They want to desecrate Judaism and present it as Zionism. They want to desecrate Christianity of our prophet of peace, Jesus, and make it the religion of genocide. And they want to desecrate Orthodoxy Christianity. They want to attack anybody and force everybody to say this white, I don't know, imaginary thing that they want to create is the right way to be, is to emulate these crazy peoples that are in charge in the West that don't even represent their own populations
Exactly.
So it's a very scary moment, because, as you said, if they know, the leadership in the West, that if they let go of even one part, it's all going to just unravel. Yeah. And this is where it's scary. We were talking before about Turkey. The Americans have nuclear weapons in Turkey. They have huge bases. They'll burn goddamn Turkey if it even tries to. They'll burn down Saudi Arabia, and they will burn down all the Gulf oil fields if anybody thinks that they can escape. You see, this is where the lunacy at this moment that we're at. And so I think people should get ready for what's coming. Here the front lines are a great indicator to where we're going, and all we can see is this war expanding and further. I just don't know if the full blowout is going to be before the American elections or after the American elections. It will all depend on the how much Biden thinks there's a possibility of him winning or not.
Internally, I mean, I don't know if you look at what's going on here. 83% of the Democratic Party, 70% of America overall want this thing over. 94% of Americans want a negotiated diplomatic deal to the Ukraine conflict. People don't want money going on because I'm here in America. Trust me, the economy ain't worth a crap here. They're saying, oh, the economy's good. People here overall are used to a better standard of living, and people are barely making ends meet, not making ends meet. It's poor. People are furious at the government, furious. It's a disaster. The traditional affiliations are just falling apart. The Democrats have been mostly black people supported the Democrats. Under 50, I just saw a thing that said black Americans under 50 in 2020, 80% of them supported Biden. It's down to 37 and falling. Black Americans are just like, we're done with these Biden, these people. They're absolutely insane, right? Everybody. So they're going around the world threatening as though they have a strong base behind them, as though they can say, we'll go to war with you and then we'll draft all these people. And if they try to draft in America, they would burn this place to the ground. People are furious at their government. They ain't ready to go fight for this government that they literally hate. Culturally, the place is falling apart. They're putting out these movies now, all the woke movies, and people are like, I'm not taking my child to that. What are you talking about here? Everything's of a sexual nature. You know what I mean? It's just the culture is collapsing. Political, I'm not a Trump fan, but let's be honest, they're going after Trump using the things that you see in, as they say, the banana republics, charging Trump with anything they can to take him out. You don't have to be a Trump fan to look at that and say, that's not democracy. So in the same way that you look at Israel and you're like, this guy's quitting, that guy's quitting, the political environment is just dissolving. You look at its masters, and the ruling elite and the political elite here they're more hated by the people here than they are in the Middle East. What kind of country is that? Where the people hate the government and the government's going around the world broadcasting about how tough they are and they're ready to fight everybody, and their own people hate their guts.
Yeah. I mean, look, there was you touched on the collapse of the Israeli army, and you talked about the resignations of Eisenkot and Gallant, and so that shows you that they're the Dahiya doctrine, because Eisenkot was the designer of that, and the Israeli minister who was Minister of War who was implementing that has failed. So what's the Dahiya doctrine? Destroying 80% of a residential area. Well, what more can you do? That's full genocide. So we're going to go see that. Similarly, look, the British are talking about conscription laws. The United States is already being talked about in the Congress, and they're in the works. So
It'll tear this country apart. These young people ain't going to go fight for a government they hate. They hate
yes.
They're suffering. They can't pay their bills. The government's screwing them over. If they think that they can conscript these young people and say, come on in and go die for us, that will be the collapse of the U.S. because they're not going to do it.
Well, maybe it's the only thing that can happen is that people need to revolt. Look, us here in Africa, Asia, Latin America, we've sat back and watched since World War II the Western elite rape their own populations. Okay. And there's never been any revolution or anything real good governance coming into power in any of these states since the end of World War II. So for me, at least, I don't see any, up until now, I don't see any revolutionary potential in the West. And I would never bet my freedom on the Western population doing anything to stop their crazy leaders from killing my people. So I'm betting on the people on the ground that are fighting. But maybe the American public needs this jolt so they can finally get up and do something to help themselves. Don't come to help me. I don't need you to think about the Palestinian people or other people in Asia or Africa or what have you. I need you to goddamn think about yourself as an American and get proper leaders in your country that care for yourself, for your own people, which I haven't seen that happening anywhere in the West since the end of World War II. So yes, let it happen. Let it happen. Let the United States burn. And but to talk about movies, did you see this movie Civil War that they just
No, I
released?
heard about it.
Okay, so it's set from the point of view of journalists covering, trying to get to the White House before the president is assassinated, because the invading armies from Florida and California are reaching the White House any minute now. So they don't tell you what the Civil War is about. It's not, you don't know about it, what's happening. It's just, you're just getting conditioned to see the moment happening. Okay. And in the end of the movie, the journalist gets, as they have the president on the ground to be assassinated, and says, hey, wait a second, can we take a picture, and can I get last word from you as the president? So clearly Western media is trying to prepare you mentally for the what's going to happen. And the people need to get ready also in the ground in these countries. They need to be sure of their own safety in a situation of full-out global war.
I suspect, I've said this, people say, what do you think about a some kind of a civil war? I said, I've been here a long time and I know the sentiment. A civil war here will look a whole lot more like the French Revolution than it will the Civil War of 1860. The anger amongst people, for the most part, is not at each other. That people are not like, well, I'm mad those people over there did the blah, blah, blah. No matter what group they're in, the anger is at the government. How come they're taxing me too much? How come I can't pay my bills? How come all our money's going overseas? I'll say this. The big factor I would say the overriding factor is imperialism and war, even people that don't know it. Because when they're saying, why is my money going for there's a Ukraine and Israel and Taiwan? Why is my money? It's all beginning to be a wake-up call that this is imperialism. The ruling elite is taking your money. You don't get any of it. You don't get the benefits of it. You get nothing. It's all going not overseas, but into the hands of their crooked cohorts, right? So people are waking up to imperialism in a way, even though they don't know it, because they're starting to ask the question, why is my money going into these overseas adventures? Well, the next step from that is to say, wait a minute, what are all these overseas adventures about? What do they protect? They don't even say they're protecting us from things anymore. So I think bit by bit, the wake up is happening here as we hear people asking the questions about the money, because the money is all about imperialism and you get none of it. So I think, as I said, the talk of civil war, they're talking about civil war because they don't want to talk about revolution. They're saying, oh, it'll be like 1860 or something. Why? Because in civil war, what happens? What happened in 1860? Poor people in the South and working people in the South slaughtered poor working people in the North back and forth. And I don't know if you know this, there were companies, for instance, that made muskets and uniforms and stuff that sold them to both sides. They were still importing cotton from the South into New York for the garment. So the rich people, as the poor folks slaughtered themselves, the rich people were still making a fortune after the war, during the war, working on both sides. That's why to them, civil war is just another opportunity for money. But they don't want to think about the French Revolution because that's where their heads get cut off. And I think that's the thing. In fact, I would say this. They're going to make a movie about civil war. They ain't going to make a movie about the French Revolution. Because fear, internal uprising.
Did you heard Biden just 4 times in the last month talk about, if somebody wants to do a revolution, a coup in the U.S., they better be ready to have F-16s. And this is in this movie. Basically, they're showing you this California-Texas alliance and the Florida alliance invading Washington, D.C. with F-16s and tanks. And I'm like, clearly you're right. This will never happen. What's going to happen is a real revolution and people rising up. And if there's a civil war, it will be prompted by the West, the elite, to distract the population from, actually reaching them and taking them out.
They always want us to fight each other. That's what it is. It's almost like they see the instability, right? And they're like, okay, this instability, the people are mad at us and we're going to end up with our heads cut off. Let's change the narrative and we'll change the narrative to one where the working class and the poor fight amongst each other. Because we see on the horizon, they're pissed at us. They just surrounded the White House the other week. They've surrounded the White House in this big, pro-Palestinian, anti-genocidal march, right? It was called Surround the White House or Choke the White House or something. Yeah, it's one. You're getting one. First you surround it, and then it gets closer and closer and closer. That is the first step towards revolution. So I think the talk of civil war is a misdirection. You poor little should fight amongst each other and kill each other because we're kind of afraid that you got your crosshairs on us. I think that's the reality of it. That maybe a movie like that is to try to misdirect people to think about that instead of looking at the people who they're really pissed at, and it ain't going to work.
Oh yeah, and it's like a test balloon, to see how the populace responds to such a movie. And I've seen many movies like this, by the way, prior to many wars. I don't know, we're old enough to remember Eddie Murphy's Best Defense. Do you remember that crazy movie in the 80s?
Didn't see it.
And the plot of the movie, and this happens this movie comes out 2 years just before the war of Iraq in 1991, the Kuwait-Iraq war. And in this movie, Eddie Murphy is a American soldier stationed in Kuwait, who's training Kuwaiti soldiers on using tanks, and Iraq gets invaded Kuwait gets invaded by Iraq. Okay, and the Americans have to fight them back, and it's a very racist comedy, by the way. It's a comedy that's very racist. So I'm not encouraging people to watch it, but I'm saying to you that this was a test balloon to see are people ready in the United States for this idea of invading Iraq. And there's many movies like that come just a year or two before a certain war. And then there's episodes in different shows, and then the references in media bit until the population is conditioned to fully accept something that was already planned years ago.
Laith Maroof, you can go to freepalestine.video. That's freepalestine.video. Great site. There's a lot of work, good work that they're doing, and you can go there and make sure that you make a donation, help support the great work that they're doing. Also, if you can't afford it, which is fine, even if you do make a donation, everybody should go to freepalestine.video, copy and paste it into all of your social media platforms. And when you put the link up, make sure you make a little note for people to donate to keep this thing going. It's extremely important that we do this and we support Laith. Follow me on Rumble, follow me on Rockfin, and thanks a lot, everybody. Laith, we'll get back together next week, and certainly appreciate your time. Keep up the good work. All right, everyone, thanks a lot. Have a great day. We're out.